Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. This is fancy, Jenna stage whispered, eyes wide as she took in the intimate setting. Moody abstract paintings adorned the cream walls, flickering votive candles on each table bathing everything in a romantic glow. When you said we were going out to celebrate, you weren't kidding around. His mom smiled, unfolding her napkin with a crisp snap. Tonight is special. It deserves a special setting. Miles ducked his head, both warmed and flustered by the implied praise. This was all so new still. He wasn't sure he'd done anything worthy of such a fuss. Hello there. My name is Michelle, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Their perky blonde waitress appeared at his elbow. Can I start you off with some drinks? Miles immediately tensed up, but she barely spared him a second glance as she whipped out her ordering pad, attention focused on his mom. I'll have a glass of the house red, please, his mother replied. Miles? Jenna? Coke for me, thanks, Jenna said. They both turned to look at him expectantly. Miles cleared his throat. A strawberry lemonade would be great, he managed, voice coming out thin and reedy. The waitress jotted it down with a peppy nod. Coming right up! She whisked their drink orders away, ponytail bouncing. Miles expelled a shaky breath. One interaction down. That hadn't been so bad. They busied themselves perusing the menu. Miles tried to concentrate on the mouth-watering pasta descriptions, but his attention kept wandering. Surreptitiously, he peeked around the dim interior, certain he'd find all eyes on their table. But no one seemed to be paying them any special attention, absorbed in their own meals and companions. Slowly, incrementally, he felt himself begin to relax. The background chatter and clink of cutlery washed over him, reminding him this was just a normal night out, no different than any other time they'd gone to dinner as a family, except now he had on a skirt instead of jeans. Michelle returned with their drinks, a bright pink concoction garnished with a strawberry slice and paper umbrella placed in front of Miles with a flourish. There you are. Now, do we need a few more minutes with the menu, or are you ready to order? His mom glanced at them inquiringly. At their nods, she smiled at Michelle. I believe we're all set, thank you. The waitress beamed, pen poised over her pad. Excellent! What'll it be? The orders rolled off their tongues, stuffed portobello mushroom caps for Miles, 4 cheese ravioli and vodka sauce for Jenna, seared scallops over wilted spinach for their mom. Michelle dutifully scribbled it all down, promising to put their requests in right away before collecting the menus and breezing off. Jenna plopped her elbows on the table the moment they were alone, leaning in conspiratorially. So, I have to know, how does it feel being out and about in a dress for the first time? Miles toyed with his lemonade straw, the cool condensation a relief against his suddenly clammy palms. It's a lot, he admitted. Part of me keeps waiting for someone to point and yell, "That's a boy in a dress." He huffed a self-deprecating laugh. Which I know is ridiculous. No one is paying any attention to me. It's not ridiculous at all, honey, his mom said gently. Doing something for the first time is always overwhelming, especially something so momentous. It's okay to be nervous. Totally, Jenna chimed in. But I hope you can see that everyone is just going about their night. No one is judging you. Miles nodded, a shy smile tugging at his lips. It helped hearing them acknowledge his anxiety. Made him feel a bit less silly for the butterflies dive-bombing his stomach. He took a steadying sip of lemonade, the tart sweetness bursting over his tongue. I'm getting there, he said honestly. I think part of me is still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to shatter this fragile new reality. His mother reached across the table, covering his hand with her own. Her skin was soft and warm, achingly familiar. I know it feels like that now, like it can't possibly last. But I promise you, we will move heaven and earth to make sure this isn't temporary. She squeezed his fingers lightly. You get to be yourself, Miles. No shoes waiting to drop. Miles' vision blurred wetly. He blinked hard, touched beyond words. What had he done to deserve such steady support? She's right, Jenna added. There's no going back now. Your fabulous self is here to stay. She raised her glass of Coke in a salute. To Miles 2.0. A startled laugh escaped him, thin and thready with emotion. He clinked his own glass against hers, then his mother's, the rims meeting with a delicate chime. To me, he echoed, barely above a whisper. It felt strange, toasting himself, indulgent, but also empowering. Jenna whistled approvingly. Yes, girl, own it. You're a goddess and don't you forget it. His mom shot her an exasperated look. Inside voice, please. But her eyes were twinkling as they met Miles's again, pride shining from their depths. Their food arrived then, momentarily sparing him the task of coming up with a response. Michelle deposited steaming plates in front of each of them with a chirpy promise to be back soon to check on them. The aroma of garlic and herbs wafting up from his stuffed mushrooms made Miles's mouth water, his stomach giving a hungry gurgle. When was the last time he'd eaten? Wow, this looks amazing, Jenna declared, already twirling a ribbon of ravioli around her fork. Sure does, his mom agreed, picking up her own utensils. Let's dig in, shall we? They fell quiet as they ate, savoring the expertly prepared dishes. Miles cut into a mushroom cap, humming appreciatively at the first burst of flavor over his tongue. For a while, the only sounds were the clink of silverware and appreciative murmurs as they worked their way steadily through their meals. Miles found himself able to relax into his chair for the first time all night as his belly filled, the tension he'd been carrying since they walked in the door slowly unknotting. Maybe it was the good food, or his mother and sister's steadfast support, or simply the normalcy of the moment. Just another family dinner. But the anxiety that had been his constant companion these past hours gradually seeped away, replaced by a bone-deep contentment. He was still riding that high when Michelle returned to clear their plates sometime later, a dessert menu tucked under one arm. I take it you enjoyed your meals? She asked brightly, stacking their dishes onto a large tray. Everything was wonderful, thank you, his mother replied. Compliments to the chef. I'll be sure to pass that along. He'll be tickled pink. Michelle finished loading up her tray and brandished the dessert list with a grin. Now, can I tempt you with something sweet? We have a fabulous tiramisu that's to die for. His mom glanced around the table. What do you say, kids? Anyone have room for dessert? Jenna groaned, patting her stomach. I'm stuffed to the gills. I don't think I could fit another bite. Miles hesitated, torn. He was pretty full himself, but the promise of sugar called to him. Sensing his conflict, his mom smiled. How about we split something? She suggested. Miles, you can pick, whatever sounds best to you. He straightened up, surprised but pleased at being given the choice. Scanning the laminated menu, he quickly zeroed in on his target. Could we do the flourless chocolate torte, please? He asked shyly, handing the menu back to Michelle. With 2 forks. You got it, she winked at him. Excellent choice. That's a personal favorite of mine. I'll have that right out for you. As she bustled away again, Miles caught his mom smiling at him, something soft in her eyes. What? He asked self-consciously, resisting the urge to check his teeth for spinach. She shook her head, reaching over to pat his hand. Nothing. I'm just so darn proud of you, honey. Truly. Same, Jenna chimed in. Watching you come out of your shell tonight has been amazing. You're crushing this whole true self thing. Miles ducked his head, pleasure warming his cheeks. I couldn't have done it without you guys, he mumbled. Knowing you have my back, it makes all the difference. Always, his mom said firmly. You never have to doubt that. Their intense sincerity, the sheer belief shining from their faces, brought a fresh sting of tears to Miles's eyes. He blinked rapidly, sniffling a bit as he tried to rein in the swell of emotion. Luckily, he was saved from completely losing his composure by Michelle's return, a decadent chocolate torte held aloft on her tray. She placed it between him and his mom with a flourish, along with 2 dainty forks. "There you are, one of Chef Tony's most popular creations. Enjoy." Miles smiled up at her, surprising himself with how genuinely happy it felt on his face. "Thank you so much for everything tonight." If Michelle was taken aback by his effusiveness, she hid it well. "It was my pleasure," she practically chirped. "You all were a delight to serve. I hope we'll see you again soon." With a parting grin, she swept off to check on her other tables. Miles turned back to find his mom already cutting into the torte with the side of her fork, the dark chocolate crumbling beneath the tines. She loaded up a hefty bite and held it out to him with a quirked brow. "Open up." Rolling his eyes fondly, Miles obediently parted his lips, allowing her to deposit the morsel on his tongue. Flavors exploded across his taste buds: rich chocolate, the hint of espresso, a whisper of orange liqueur. He closed his eyes with a rapturous sigh. "Good, huh?" Jenna asked knowingly. Miles could only nod as he chewed, momentarily rendered mute by bliss. His mom seemed equally enchanted, eyes fluttering shut as she savored her own forkful. My goodness, Michelle wasn't kidding about this torte. They took turns feeding each other bites, giggling when crumbs went astray, or a particularly large piece threatened to topple off a fork. Miles couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this light, this unabashedly joyful. It filled his chest like sunlight, chasing out the last lingering shadows. By the time their shared plate was nothing but faint chocolate smears, he was practically boneless with contentment. His soul felt scoured clean, the future stretching ahead of him, limitless and bright. Settling the bill was a similarly relaxed affair, the 3 of them lingering over the last sips of their drinks as Michelle ran his mom's card. Miles found himself reluctant for the evening to end, this magical bubble where he got to just be. But all too soon they were standing up from the table, his mom ushering them toward the door with a final farewell to their wonderful server. Night had fully fallen while they ate, the inky sky studded with pinpricks of stars. A pleasant breeze ruffled Miles's hair as they made their way across the parking lot. The heat of the day dissipated. "Did you have a good time tonight, baby?" his mom asked as they reached the car, unlocking it with a chirp. Miles paused with one hand on the passenger door, turning to face her. "The best," he said, and meant it down to his bones. "I can't thank you enough for this, for everything." Her face softened, eyes going bright under the orange glow of the streetlights. "You never have to thank me for loving you," she said gently. "It's unconditional, no matter what." She closed the space between them, folding him into a tight hug. Miles clung back just as fiercely, face buried in the warm juncture between her neck and shoulder. Emotions swelled up his throat, tangling his tongue. Jenna draped herself across his back a moment later, turning it into a Hanson family sandwich that had them all huffing damp laughs. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together before slowly shuffling apart. His mom reached up to cup his cheeks between her palms, eyes tracing over his features like she was memorizing this new version of him. Her smile wobbled at the corners, joy and fierce pride shining through. "My beautiful, brave Miles," she breathed. "The world better get ready for you." Miles mirrored her watery grin. His heart felt too big for his chest as he climbed into the car, the most precious kinds of growing pains. The drive home was quiet, the 3 of them comfortably talked out for the night. Miles rested his head against the window, watching the city lights streak past in a kaleidoscope blur of colors. The cool glass felt good against his cheek, grounding him in the moment. When they finally pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, he had to take a moment to just breathe. Everything looked the same, their modest little house with the slightly overgrown lawn, the porch light his mom always left on, blazing a cheery welcome. But Miles felt irrevocably changed, like he'd walked out. One boy and returned someone new, someone more himself than he'd ever been before. "You okay?" Jenna asked softly, startling him out of his reverie. She had one hand on the door handle, head tilted as she studied him in the darkness of the car. Miles smiled, unbuckling his seatbelt with a decisive click. "Never better," he said honestly. "Let's go inside." The three of them traipsed up the front walk together, his mom fitting her key in the lock and pushing the door open wide. Miles stepped over the threshold and into the foyer, drinking in the familiar sight of their coat rack and welcome mat with new eyes. Had the air always smelled faintly of the lavender potpourri his mom favored? The photographs lining the walls, were they always this vibrant? He realized with a start that he was seeing his home, his life, through a filter of joy, of peace. For perhaps the first time, everything felt entirely right, aligned in a way it never had before. Kicking off his flats and wiggling his liberated toes, Miles padded into the living room and collapsed backward onto the overstuffed couch with a euphoric sigh. The evening's tension drained out of him all at once, leaving him melted and languid against the cushions. Jenna flopped down beside him a moment later, immediately burrowing into his side like an affectionate limpet. "So," she said, drawing out the word with an impish grin, "best night ever, right? Totally worth the stress of picking out an outfit." Miles snorted, shifting to accommodate her pointy elbows. "The absolute best," he confirmed, "though I don't know if anything could be worth that particular form of torture ever again." "I heard that!" their mom called from the kitchen, voice threaded with amusement. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, a steaming mug of tea in each hand. "Although, in the interest of honesty, I can't disagree." She handed Miles and Jenna their respective drinks before settling into the armchair across from them, cradling her own mug close to her chest. Miles inhaled the soothing scent of chamomile and honey, the heat seeping into his palms a welcome contrast to the car's chill. For a few minutes, a comfortable silence reigned, broken only by gentle sips and quiet sighs of contentment. Miles let his head tip back against the cushions, eyes tracing idle patterns on the ceiling. He felt filled up in the best way, buoyed by the unshakable certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, with the people who mattered most. Eventually, his mom set down her half-empty mug and shifted forward, hands clasped loosely between her knees. "So," she said, unknowingly echoing Jenna's earlier word choice. Her eyes were soft but intent as they met Miles. "Talk to me, honey. How are you feeling? Really feeling?" Miles gazed back, struggling to find the words to encompass the sheer breadth of emotion expanding his ribcage. "Free," he said at last, barely above a whisper. "For the first time in my life, I feel ... free." His mom's breath hitched, eyes going glossy, but her smile was blinding. "Oh, Miles," she breathed. "I am so, so happy to hear that. More than you can possibly know." "Ditto," Jenna chimed in, bumping her shoulder against his. "Watching you come into yourself tonight was legit the coolest thing I've ever seen. You owned that skirt, bro." A slightly damp laugh punched out of Miles, the last of his dignity abandoning him. He swiped at his wet cheeks, unaccountably bashful under the force of their pride. "It was pretty great," he admitted, ducking his chin. "I never imagined I could feel so at home in my own skin. Like everything just clicked into place." "Of course it did," his mom said gently. "Because this is who you were always meant to be. The truest, most authentic version of yourself." Miles gave a wonderstruck little nod, momentarily robbed of speech. He'd spent so long fighting against his own nature, terrified of what it might mean, of how the world would react. To finally embrace it, to feel that sense of rightness settle deep in his bones, it defied description. "Thank you," he managed at last, the words clumsy and inadequate in his mouth. "For everything you've done, everything you've been these past weeks. I couldn't have made it here without you." "Hey now, none of that," his mom chided, but her eyes were bright, voice wobbly. "You never have to thank us for loving you, remember? It's not a hardship or an obligation. It just is." "Totally," Jenna agreed. "You're stuck with us, sis. No take-backs. Miles huffed a watery chuckle, covering his face with his hands as the pesky tears made another appearance. "You guys are the worst," he informed them, voice muffled. "I've already cried like 12 times tonight. I'm supposed to be all cried out, but here you are proving me wrong." "Aw, baby bro. Come here, you need a hug." Jenna pounced on him before he could protest, wiry arms latching around his neck like a koala. Miles sputtered, flailing under her surprisingly substantial weight. His mom's laughter pealed out, sweet and merry, before she too was crossing the narrow space between them, sandwiching Miles in an embrace. He found himself squashed between the two most important women in his life, his face smushed into someone's lavender-scented shoulder, and suddenly his chest was so full it ached, a sweet, solar flare of joy. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing each other in. Miles closed his eyes, trying to memorize the way everything felt. The softness of his mom's cardigan under his cheek, the steady drum of Jenna's heartbeat against his own. He wanted to freeze this instant in amber, preserve it for all time. Eventually, they shuffled apart again, all of them suspiciously misty-eyed. His mom took an unsteady breath, visibly pulling herself together. When she met Miles's gaze again, her own was clear and warm, that endless well of maternal love. "You should be so proud of yourself, honey," she told him. "I know I am, more than I could ever put into words." He hoped the feeling never went away, that 10, 20, 50 years from now, he would still remember this exact feeling. The giddy thrill of having his truth not just known, but celebrated. Of donning an identity that fit him like a second skin, not a single seam out of place. The future unfurled before him, suddenly ripe with possibility. He could wear skirts to school now if he wanted. Dresses on the weekend when he wasn't in stupid khakis and polos. Maybe he'd even start painting his nails, just to see how the pop of color looked against his skin tone. He could change his name officially, too, make Miles more than just a private experiment. He wondered what that process entailed, if his mom would have to sign a bunch of forms. Probably, given that he was a minor. But he didn't think she'd mind, based on how over the moon she'd been tonight. God, he had so many options now. An entire horizon of undiscovered countries, there for his exploring. It was dizzying, trying to wrap his head around it all. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.